it's not climate change, it's a climate emergency and it's a crisis.
But to my mind, we have actually reached a tipping point and tipped over. It is too late.
You go to the ocean, you will find that the sea is also not, because there are already 400 dark zones. And it was all because of the lot of waste that we have added to the sea.
We are in that terrible borderline. We are already nearing 2 degrees and we cannot afford the earth to go hotter. But obviously, we are not doing enough.
We are way far off from achieving 1.5 degree, and that's particularly because these countries are not doing enough. And particularly speaking, the developed countries have not played their role, and they've been dragging their feet on providing finances for the developing and least developing countries.
You cannot grow at the expense of another country. If you are talking about the globe, one part of the globe cannot grow at the expense of the other, and therefore this has to be understood by all.
I look at COP26 is that, why there was a lot of anticipation around it is because there wasn't a summit ever since COVID happened, right?
COP26, it depends on what you define as success and define as priorities. It equips the international community to respond to things like, drought, floods, and events that, we can't control anymore, and to some degree we cannot prepare for. Perhaps even more important is that countries really embrace the messages coming from COP.
Summits are important to the extent that they are markers. They are markers of where the world stands. For example, COP is a United Nations summit. Now, these serve as reminders to a global promise. They are useful reminders of the promise that humanity makes to itself in the name of humanity.
See, the COP kind of event is happening from last few decades. But what we have been witnessing is that world leaders have failed to tackle the climate crisis.
The Chinese capture of the United Nations is complete. And the COP is a United Nations event. I'm actually appalled at how little this has been brought out in the influential media in the world. Because what China wants, the United Nations does. And if I had one major worry, is that China will also influence India. And this I hope will not happen.
China, as you know, China is a world of its own. They didn't even mark an attendance here at COP26. So therefore, they will continue to emit, without a doubt. But the fact is that they have made some promises. And even if they stand by those promises, then we can contain it at 1.5 or 1.7 as they're saying.
Look at India now. We don't pledge for deforestation. We don't pledge for methane, which is such a big problem in India. We have zero waste management in this country. We've lost, close to 44,000 hectares of the rainforests. If we are going to go this route, it's not going to help because that means we are still in denial.
India has committed certain things at the international platform, but if we look at certain actions, be it the dilution of the Forest Conservation Act or opening up of new coal mines, these kind of actions goes contrary to what we are committing, and these are definitely going to be detrimental for our forests, our wildlife.
India has finally decided a net zero year and so on and so forth. But you see, it was laced with probabilities which has now emerged, and in fact, if you read the papers, the Environment Secretary has said that, first give us 1 trillion and then we'll sort of do this punch amrit. So eventually it turns out again that, we're shooting our mouth off, but we're not backing it with facts. We're expecting the West to finance this. We're continuing to harp on the fact that they're responsible for occupying the carbon space, and therefore they should address it, they should finance us to address it. But the fact is that this is a combined effort, and if you just say, okay, you give me the money and then I'll pay my debts, that's not going to work. So it is this Panchamrit, to my mind, is a great disappointment, not just for us in the country, but for the entire world.
Methane is also, as you know, one of the biggest emitters, and India is one of the top emitters. So, I mean, I would have questions to why this was not, why this was not signed, because it's critical that we took that step. So, this is a concern point for all of us.
We have a 70% dependence on coal for our energy needs. The fact is that we cannot deny that the country still depends largely on coal, and there is actually no alternative to coal right now that we've been able to harness. So therefore, it is a very, very tricky situation for India.
If you think about India's situation right now, there are about 100 gigawatts of renewable energy installed, and the Prime Minister wants to get to 500 gigawatts, which is, a completely different scale of magnitude. And unless something really dramatic happens, there's like a literal revolution in the energy market, and demand grows accordingly, because demand has to grow for these energy installations to make sense. I think it's going to be a very difficult target to reach.
Now, what is happening in India is happening world across on matters of environment. Everyone across the world will build the airports, they will build the roads, they will build all kinds of ports, they will build all the infrastructure. But at what cost? I mean, this is something, everybody says, okay, we need to cut forests. Why do you need to cut forests? You could take a little longer route. How does it matter that you have to destroy a wildlife area?
India has a lot of inhabited forests. There are a lot of people living in the forest right now. And so it really needs a tailored policy that respects the people living in the forest, and while also making space for development, because there isn't a lot of land.
I would say definitely we should stop deforestation. We should have a real climate action in place.
Right now, you and I are sitting in the most polluted capital of the world. Okay, we are choking right now. We cannot even implement the 2016 bylaws, solid waste management bylaws. Which country do you know that who doesn't segregate even two, segregations, the dry or the wet? We have not been able to implement that. Such a failure of authorities.
I don't know whether we are leaving a planet at all. I don't know whether we are leaving a planet, or whether the planet will completely disintegrate in time, whether its children will have a chance even to live on this planet anymore. At this point in time, it seems extremely bleak.
My girls are now going to turn 18, and from the year they were born, this battle is being fought. So their lungs are damaged. No matter what we did, we said, we talked, we fought, we debated, whatever the hell, all the lungs, all of you youngsters, your lungs have been damaged, and they're still getting damaged every second.
There are things that our generations and previous generations were able to enjoy that they won't be able to, from coral reefs to maybe certain types of food, or simply, a more stable climate with less erratic weather events. So all of this is to some degree unavoidable by now.
We'll be leaving a planet in much worse state than what we got, and the future generations would always have this question of, if our earlier generation would have done enough, maybe we would have been living in a different world, maybe a world where we could have seen these few of the coastal regions which existed before. Maybe we could have seen the glaciers, maybe we could have seen these pristine forests. If we don't act enough, we might just leave these videos, pictures, and memories of forest, glaciers, beautiful coastal regions for our generation. But if we act in time, our future generation will be able to see part of what we have seen.
You see, we are cheating the future generations. We are encroaching upon, we are eating away their resources. We are only trustees, we are only custodians of these resources.
In Article 4.7,
of the UN Framework Convention on Climate Change, which says that the first and overriding priority, and I'm quoting these words, the first and overriding priorities of the developing countries is economic and social development and poverty eradication. These are not essential merely to achieve the sustainable development goals. It's not just the development aspect. It is essential in order to build up some capacity to cope with the impacts of climate change.
At 500 AQI today, what we are breathing, there has to be absolutely no tree cutting till we come to AQI 60 for the whole year. There has to be no crackers. I mean, everything has to be very, very, very strict.
You see, the first thing is that we need to put down in black and white what needs to be done. We need to put the deadlines there.
For India, the way forward is we need a concrete action plan when we speak about emissions. B, shorter commitments, but shorter, effective, detailed, comprehensive commitments is what we now need to see. Even if we have now a 2070 goal, let's see what are the sub-goals within it.
The next COP is going to happen in Egypt next year. All these countries, including India, including USA, including all these developed countries and the developing countries, they really must come up with a stricter plan to reduce the emission targets, 45% emission targets by 2030.
The world knows exactly what is causing the climate change. Every cause is identified. The extent of every cause is identified. A solution to every cause, what is to be done, the action is identified. The cost of taking that action is identified. What, to my mind, is missing is the implementation of the action plans.
The burden has to be shared by every country in the international community, and it has to be shared in accordance with the principle of common but differentiated responsibilities and national circumstances.
We should be in the worst books. Whoever is not cooperating should be in the worst books right now. They should be, kept aloof, and they should have, in the olden days how sanctions were, put and all. We need to come back to that system.
They are saying the economy will rise. What about the gross environment product which we are seeing in the state I belong to? We say that if it is economic growth, what is our ecological growth that we wanted to know?
And there is something else that I think is important. That COP showed that there is a growing community of extremely well-informed journalists who know what they are talking about. Small communities, but it bears out what I believe is the future. Small communities, deeply networked. And a lot of people were just remotely following each other and, sharing information so that we could amplify. Now, this is a very important thing that's happening. And everyone will get called out. And this includes, since I'm an Indian, this includes people in India who do not have India's interests in their heart.
Everybody is together in this. Sooner or later, everybody will suffer.
I don't share any doomsday situations for the simple reason that I believe in human beings and our remarkable capacity to work things through. So I do not believe in doomsday situations.
The current system is really giving priority to the profit and not the people. So we need to change that.
The situation on the ground, obviously the situation is bad and getting worse, and it's really important to act now.
Whoever is the political power, I'm not saying bureaucrats. Bureaucrats is not the problem. But start questioning decisions. Why is this being done? Why is that being done? Where is the money coming from? Where are the interests? Where are the vested interests? Why is something being done there and not here? Is it a question of money? Is it a question of politics? Is it a question of indifference? We've got to get that conversation going. Because this is something in public interest. And public is us.
And the planet we are leaving behind will not have a water, soil, air, anything, that makes a person to survive. And unfortunately, we are not worried about Jan. We are worried about Jahan. So Jahan will only be possible when you can enjoy a better Jahan, a better world, when you will have your own life with you.